Ministry. Welcome back to the return. You when your host this afternoon, and I hope you are having actually a great Tuesday afternoon. As I alluded earlier, we are going to be speaking to Madelein Mkunu. She's the founder of an organization called Women, Leading Women in Africa, and she champions and advocates for women in Africa, and today she's going to invite us on the role of the women in geopolitics. A very good afternoon to you, Madelein, and thank you so much for making time to chat to us here on the Class Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Gwen. Thank you.
Yeah, and then going straight into it, you just had this geopolitics, dialogue quite recently, and maybe if you can just let us know, maybe for, we are an institution that has got, young students, academic professors, but perhaps there's a student out there who does not know what is geopolitics.
Right. So thank you so much for that question. It's actually very important to understand geopolitics and especially why women need to get involved in geopolitics. I think in a nutshell, where I could start is by saying, behind every conflict, behind every diplomatic tension, or every trade war, lies the control of resources, actually the need for control of resources. So as an example, if one could look at even just the situation, the instability in Eastern DRC or in Sudan and South Sudan, or even in Boko Haram case in Nigeria, and even the recent not uprising, but insurgents in Mozambique, one will need to understand that whatever is behind that is the control of resources. And as we know, why actually women need to get involved, as we know the impact, the socio-economic impact of those insurgents and those issues, it impacts greatly women and children. So as we stand here, it's actually important for women to understand why the situations that, we might be facing. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to say, geopolitics is really trying to understand the dynamics of power, of influence, and control of resources, which has impact in whatever human being is facing. And I think we owe to actually understand not only the consequences or the impact of whatever is happening, but rather to understand the root cause, of the socio-economic impact that women, children, everyone might be going through.
Because most of the time, especially because of ignorance or the fact that people, just see things happening in these different countries, and they just see conflict or people fighting, and they really don't understand the root cause. And that becomes, a problem, because you find people saying, it's the DRC again, or it's Nigeria, Boko Haram, or South Sudan again, without understanding the fundamentals. And I just love how you unpack it so that even a layman can understand what that actually means for anybody. Now, the dialogue posed a powerful question, Madelein. If African women had to choose a continent partner, would it be the West or the Global South? As someone immersed in this conversation, how would you frame that choice?
Right. So I really don't think, Gwen, I really don't think that we need to get to a point where we need to choose, right? Or I think the approach is actually to say, in business, we have what we call SWOT analysis. Your strength, your weaknesses, the opportunities and threat. Africa need to get to the point where they understand their SWOT analysis. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where are my opportunities? And where are my threats? And I think once you understand your SWOT analysis, you will be good at playing the game, because it's definitely, the geopolitics is like a game. If you don't understand your strength, someone else will understand your strength and will play at your ignorance, and make you feel like you have no strength while you have your strength. So it's not about choices. So if we look at the West and the global South, the new emerging powers, they both sides, they bring opportunities and risks. So I think what is important that African, especially African women, they need to understand what is better for me. What are the, geopolitics, or in politics in general, is about interest. Where are my interests? In actually negotiating, where am I gonna win? And that comes from the first point, understanding what are our strengths. We need to understand as Africans what do we have that we can call strength. Then from there you can understand, well, I've got this, these are my strengths. From my weaknesses, these are the kinds of partnerships that I need so that I can close the gaps of my weaknesses. That's how we need to go. So it's not a black and white, we need to go, it's not about who do we want to go with. It's actually where lies our interest, what will benefit the people of the continent. And I think that way we need to continue holding our leaders accountable, so that as they negotiate in favor of the people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Madeleine, having said what you said about not necessarily making a choice, but playing on our strengths, the fact of the matter that we cannot run away from is that, the West has had a long history of engagement in Africa, often accompanied by exploitation and dependency. In your view, what lessons should Africa take from this history when deciding future alliances?
Right. For future alliances, we first need to remember one thing. You just talked the issue of dependency, so, for centuries now, Africa has been depending on aid and so on, so if we can just look at even just the past 2, 3 years, the aid that came into Africa, I think it exceeds over $200 billion. But when you look at the impact of that, did it have an impact in terms of, infrastructure or industrialization? Because it's more through industrialization that, they could be creating jobs, So as we know, the joblessness or unemployment is quite high in Africa. So it's not about that. What we need to look at is that once we understand our strength, we know that we have natural resources. I think the way that we can navigate through that is to say, how can we do so that we can create jobs? And it can only be through not exporting raw material, but rather transforming them on the ground. And I think if just we can go through that approach, we won't have any problem of choosing. It will be more a matter of, okay, this is what we have and this is how we want to do. So I think the policies, and even I heard recently that BRICS has a policy of or they trying to encourage the policy of not exporting raw material, but rather transforming them on the continent. That's really the key that we can play at our strength. I think politics is really just knowing how to play at your strength. And I think that is the most important thing that I would say that we need to focus on. Let's focus on our strength.
Yeah. And you know, Madeleine, so many times we've heard over the decades of the rich minerals that we have, but the fact that the very minerals, we have to now take them outside of the continent to be refined and, change into something else that is brought again to us to buy. It is really a sad state of affairs because it seems we are again and again falling into that cycle of, dependence with these players. And you have actually, in a way, answered what I actually wanted to ask you in terms of, these emerging powers such as BRICS, bringing infrastructure and investment. So in a way, you actually have covered that part that, once we know our strengths, whether they are strengths in terms of our mental capacity, our minerals, our intellect, and how we can change the narrative, I think we are on the right route. And what concludes me, Madeleine, is that this narrative has been spoken about for so long, but the ship seems a little bit too slow. Where do we get it wrong?
Right. So, yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think it's quite important. Where we are right now, we are at crossroads. Yeah, we know that. And we know that everyone is quoting us. We have the West, we have the emerging powers and all that. But I think what is important is our leaders. We need really, for me, I think transparency is key. Transparency from our leaders, but also more importantly, strong institutions. We are there. We are being quoted from all over the places. We need to have that transparency. Our leaders, by going to negotiate there, they need to really be clear as to what will benefit our people. Strong institutions need to be there to actually safeguard, whatever partnerships that we do have. Let's give an example. Let's say we are negotiating a big project for a country that will create jobs, that it has potential to actually change the lives of the people, to bring development. Strong institutions would recommend that such deals need to be discussed at Parliament. The people's voices need to be heard. When it comes to certain negotiations, I think just holding our leaders accountable, is key. Where and when we start talking about accountability, it's also really just to try and mitigate corruption. As we know, corruption is widening the gaps of poverty. Until we really get to the point where we hold our leaders accountable, we demand transparency, and we demand strong institutions, we will continue to actually fall in the trap of, our so-called partners that are quoting us.
Madeleine, it's such a sad state that, corruption has really, it's come to be so uncontrollable. There is a phrase that we use widely, the phrase of Ubuntu. It seems, especially in the context of South Africa, there was a time when times were hard, especially for people of color. There was that unity, there was that unison to say, let's fight for this cause. And we have done it seamlessly without war, without conflict and everything. And just when you think it is time, to reap the sacrifices, comes this, evil called corruption, greed, bribery, and all of these elements. And, I honestly don't know where they come from because, it's spreading like, a virus because, in all departments you find corruption. It's people that we entrust ourselves. It's people that have vouched before us to say, what, I see where the problem is. I can make a difference, and how democracy works. Obviously, if you fall for that or power and don't account, it is really sad because it's taking us back. I mean, in the context of South Africa, we are 30 plus years into the dream, and it's really become a big problem.
That's correct. I think honestly, accountability cannot be discounted. You know, if we really want the well-being of the people and development of our continent, we need to continue to hold our leaders accountable because we are the one who put them in the position where they are. And that's where the strong institutions come in, because when we have strong institutions, it means that the voters or the people have the voice. And that is really, really important.
I have highlighted that women do not negotiate with records. They negotiate with I really, really love that phrase. So lovely because we are nurturers, and we are builders. And given that context, how do you see women's unique strengths such as emotional intelligence and moral abilities shaping Africa's geopolitical strategy?
Right. So I think you rightly said, you know, that is the strength of women. Women, like you rightly said, do not negotiate with with weapon or anything. They in the emotional intelligence that they bring to the table. And I think for me, what will be important to ensure that women actually sit at the table of negotiation. As we know, and I think one thing that I always like bringing on a table is to say that we know that for Africa, for instance, women represent over 52% of the population. And we are raising women leaders. However, when it comes to decision-making tables, we can see that we are lagging behind. So there's not a lot of women that are sitting where decisions are being made. Let's talk about this, the geopolitics that we're talking. During the meeting, there was a former vice Speaker of ECOWAS Parliament, for example. She was giving an example of during the war in Liberia, in West Africa, that it was actually women that used their intelligence to actually negotiate. You know, so examples like that, and I think another speaker brought another example in Madagascar. Again, it was two women sitting around the table to come up with solutions. So, what will be key is to ensure that more and more women are sitting at the table of negotiation. Long is the time where leaders were sitting around the table and asked the question, what can we do for women? It's now time to say, what can we do with women? You know, women need to be there because when it comes to the times of war, you know, the socio-economic impact it's weighing quite heavily on women and children. So if they could be at the table when decision is being made, when negotiations are being made, they will bring that emotional intelligence that is needed so that, the lasting peace, you know, or sustainable solutions be found. You know, like a mother, when you see two brothers fighting, you know, it's not, I mean, even if there is a third party that is instigating that fight, you know, a mother will always want to see how can we end this? Because as we can see in Africa context, for instance, when there is a fight, it's actually women that is being persecuted, is the rape or is really, you know, the violence of any form. Women are going through that. So I think it's really just about time to ensure that women sit at the table of negotiation, any negotiation, whether it's trade negotiation, whether it's wars, whether it's, political, you know, diplomatic, it's quite important that women sit there because women, for me, woman is like a door. He sees inside, he sees outside. So she will be a better negotiator, when it comes to important issue that have impact on humanity.
Yeah. Madeleine, I hear you about, women being at the table, but most of the time, what you see being the norm is that, the women at the table will be, prominent people like themselves who are articulate, they've got, educated, they've got the exposure. However, especially in the continent, you find that there are grassroots women leaders and community builders, So beyond formal politics and, formal seats at the table, how can these women play a role in influencing Africa's global partnership?
Yeah, I think really women at grassroots are already influencing policies, by just mobilizing communities. It's already, they are having their voices. We can see women farmers, for instance, they could be negotiating, access to the market, or women entrepreneurs really just trying to negotiate a better deal for them. So women, even at grassroots, from what we see, they are already influencing policies to some extent, because what is important is actually that continued awareness of the issues that are going on in a community or at that grassroots level. It's actually those women, those community leaders that are bringing those awareness. And I think that is playing a major role in terms of the policymakers to hear from them and capture what is being said at the community and translate it into policies. So I think they are doing really great work, and all we can say is really just to continue to empower, to continue to engage the women at community level, at grassroots level, because that's where actually the masses are. And for any policy even to be well interpreted, it needs to reach the masses so that it can have the impact that it intended for.
The event raised a critical point, that of Africa's resources belonging to Africans, but without power, control takes away. How can women leaders help shift Africa from being resource rich but power poor to being sovereign and strategic?
Yeah, that is a very good point that we discussed at the meeting, like you are alluding to. And I think one thing that I could say is that the fragmentation of the continent, the continent, though it's one piece of land, but divided into 54 pieces, and all that fragmentation is actually preventing Africa to unite with one voice. So that is one thing. So we need to see the root cause of, yes, we do have the resources, but we can't control them because we're not united. Because we're not united. And we're not united because the continent has been broken into small pieces, that could easily be manipulated by the external forces. So I think the solution for me will be, let's rally behind the AU. We know the AU has the Agenda 2063 that is actually looking at the year 2063 to ensure that Africa is a better place for all to live in. And we know that the Agenda 2063 as well places a woman at the center of development. So the one thing is that, what we are trying to advocate, I think the one tool that Africa can continue to strengthen or to work around is the African regional integration around the AU. And not only the AU, but also the regional blocs, your SADC, your ECOWAS, your East Africa, your Central Africa, and so on. Those are the blocks that could strengthen, the together with AU to strengthen the unity. Because it's only when we start speaking with one voice that we will be strong in negotiating on behalf of Africa. So unity for me is very, very important. And again, talking about women sitting around the table, and that when we can start talking about, how do we negotiate with any power? Even now, we're talking about the US tariffs. If we are not united, we'll never win that battle. It will be South Africa going to negotiate on its own. Then it will be Nigeria going to negotiate on its own. Then it will be another smaller country, then another one. While if we are together, and rallying behind the AU and its regional bloc, I think that will give us the power of negotiation that will actually allow us to, to secure that win-win partnership that we're looking for with our development partners.
You touch on something that I actually never thought of it that way. We tend to look at Africa and I actually never, I can see the demarcation and the differences in the various countries, but I never actually looked at it from a point of view that just by virtue of that, we are already divided and we're only looking at our little corner, but we have similar problems. And together, if we can come together and tackle problems chunk by chunk, we're saying, that elephant, just sort of like put it chunk by chunk. It's really cool. Look at Africa as the continent and forget a little bit about the demarcation, especially regarding the challenges and common challenges that we have. We could perhaps go alone, but I suppose what that might do, as much as it will help, it will it will obviously step on toes. You know how African leaders love their power, and in our lifetime, we've seen how presidents or statesmen or people in leadership have literally refused to leave the office. Even if they've been there for decades and decades, you just find that people just don't have that will. They new for leaders who want to come to the party, new mindset, new solutions, but no. We've seen people, say X has been in power for 20 years, 30 years, and those people are naturally very difficult to convince otherwise, and because they hold power, they in a way also store the progress that we could be making as a continent.
And just talking about that, Gwen, I wanted just to comment on the point that you just make there. So it's so unfortunate that even the democratic principles that we are being preached is not being upheld in Africa. Because if you look at the same leaders that you're saying they will cling into power 30 years, 40 years, and you will literally see that they are supported by the very same, people that are preaching democracy to us. And I think it's so sad. It's really, really so sad that, the democratic principles are not being, applied in Africa the way it should. The way, the way it originated from, You know, the way it's being applied there, it's not being applied in Africa. And the very same people that created democracy are supporting the, basically democracy not being withheld in Africa the way it should. And that's why the very same people that are being, or they are overstaying into power, they are being supported by the very same partners.
Yeah. Yes, Madeleine, this has been such an amazing conversation and so insightful. I have really, really enjoyed it. You know, we took geopolitics as a very big term that's very intimidating to an extent, and broken it down into practicality, and it has really made the conversation so easy to flow. And perhaps finally, before I let you go, if you could leave listeners with one message about Africa's future partnership, what would it be? And why should women's voices be at the center of that choice?
Yeah, it's quite important, eh? It's very, very important. I think the initially what I said is that the socioeconomic impact of the geopolitics, actually women and children are the ones that are feeling it the most. You know, it's weighing quite heavily on women. So it should be a mission of every woman to actually try to understand the root cause of what we are facing. You know, so yes, we could be, yes, rape is like a pandemic, and you name it. So we have so many pandemics that we are facing. But until we understand the root cause, we'll continue to try and sort out the symptoms. And just treating the symptoms does not necessarily solve the problem. So I would like just to invite every woman, whether you're a mother, whether you are an entrepreneur, professional, women leaders, president wives, ministers, and all that. All of us, we are the ones that can change actually the face of the continent as women. Representing 52% of the population comes with a responsibility to ensure that the future of this land depend on us. The way we educate children, and even if we can bring the understanding, from even just the understanding of geopolitics at primary school level, at high school level, I think it will open up the young generation the mind to understand that the future of this continent depend on me. Even when they're making choices of studies, they will study subjects that will benefit this continent, not necessarily subjects that you don't know by the time you finish studies, you don't know what to do with. So I think it's upon us as women, as mothers, to actually ensure that we educate our children, we give our children the tools that they need to do so that they can invest back in our land. We have the obligation, if God trusted us to actually bring life in this world, I think we have the obligation to also ensure that we bring peace, that we negotiate peace, or maybe we reinforce hope for humanity. We have the greatest responsibility. And I would like to call on every woman to actually take it seriously. Thank you.
Powerful participation. That was Madelein Mkunu, a champion and advocate for women across Africa. And Madelein, thank you so much for having me the time to engage with us on such a critical subject. We wish you well in your endeavors as new champion, advocate, empower the voices of women out there. And I'm certainly not the last time that we engage on this platform.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.